Hey, it's Jordan, live from a wonderful kitchen here in Michigan. We were hanging out by the lake, but unfortunately the neighbor's lawnmower stopped us. So I'm here with Jeff Frazier, an attorney, musician, very kindred spirit to, I think, a lot of great progressive causes. And obviously President Trump and his administration's just callous policy, if you call it a policy, has been making a lot of headlines the last few weeks, but you actually have been focused on, the foster care system and a lot of these refugees coming into the foster care system here in Michigan. You've sued the state. You have an active lawsuit against the state. And speaking with you, I think it's really valuable because you've kind of shown me that these are not necessarily refugees from other countries per se. Can you kind of explain what got you into, taking legal action against the state, and whose refugees are these really?
Yes, and you said the word that we all need to continue to emphasize, which is refugee. A refugee is someone that's fleeing a war-torn zone and is being persecuted for being there. And it's important to realize that these children and their mothers and their parents and these families and all of these families that have been coming for the last years now are coming as a direct response to United States military intervention in Mexico as part of the drug war. They implemented some 8 years ago what was called Plan Merida, which basically pumped billions of dollars into the Mexican military to declare war on the cartels. A bloodbath ensued, 100,000 dead, 100,000 missing, and more, and huge numbers of refugees. So these children and their parents, and many of these people coming across the border, are fleeing United States policy in Mexico. And so these are our refugees. We bought them, we caused them, we created them, and now we need to stand up. And clearly that's not happening. I'm not saying it just now started to go bad. It's been bad. But first and foremost, like you say, we need to recognize that these are refugees from a situation that we have created with our insane drug policy down in Latin America.
And I think I know the answer, but might as well ask. What was the U.S.'s motivation on pumping all this money into Mexico to combat Mexico's cartels? I assume somehow profit, but what was the origin of that anyway?
Well, I mean, it's $1 trillion. The drug war supports not only 40% of our domestic criminal justice system, meaning the police budgets and the prosecutor budgets and the court budgets but has long been used as a pretext for intervention in other countries. You'll recall that when the Congress prohibited President Reagan from continuing to wage the wars in Central America, in El Salvador and in Nicaragua, well, the CIA proceeded to protect cocaine shipments into Los Angeles and cut arms deals with Iran to continue to fund these things.
And now Oliver North, who is behind Iran-Contra, you're president of the NRA.
That's right, you're president over there. So there are many, in a nutshell, a justification for intervention. Brief story, long story I'll try to make brief, is we were involved in litigation to stop what was then called Plan Colombia, where they went purportedly to fumigate all the coca crops in Colombia and this, that, and the other. But if you took a good hard look at where they were fumigating and you overlaid a map of where the petroleum was, you saw that it was a perfect match. So drug policy has historically and long been used as a pretext or justification for foreign intervention, most often in areas that are resource rich. Afghanistan, we funded the Mujahideen to take on the Soviet Union, but protected the heroin shipments into Western Europe to finance it. So there's a lot of reasons why we do it, mostly because we've built this $1 trillion drug war apparatus, and you make a bomb, and well, it's meant to go off so that you can buy the next one. So, the justification for it was to go and wage war against the Mexican cartels.
Right. And I think something people don't realize, and I didn't know until I started talking to you, was, all right, we see these grisly images at the border and this and that, but there's also a profit motive and a profit system that's going on with these foster care companies, that a lot of these children, Trump signed an executive order that legally he didn't even need to. He could have done it without an executive order. But a lot of these children that have been separated from their parents have already been put into foster care, including here in Michigan. And these foster care systems and the churches placing them are coming out like bandits financially. Because in the case of the parents and children getting separated now, I just read that 2 kids under 1 year old were placed in Grand Rapids, I believe, at Bethany. It's almost like a cultural reappropriation where you're kidnapping kids, refugees, that maybe they're religious where they're from, maybe they're not, who knows, but they are being basically forced into another religion. And then there's laws, which you could describe. If they're with that new family for a certain amount of time, there's laws that protect the new family's rights over them.
Right, and it shouldn't be. At some point, it certainly gets to, hopefully not in every case, and we fought them off in our cases, ultimately got these kids back and their families reunited, but it took a year's worth of litigation from one of the top, outfits to do it. Now we're talking about numbers that are genuinely staggering. There's 2 that have arrived, but I believe that there's 80 plus of these refugees from the border who are now, as you say, being placed with this same entity who also has a contract with the federal government.
Tell us about that contract.
I don't know. I haven't seen it. I don't know what it is. That's something that would certainly be worth a FOIA request. I don't know. Are they entitled to discriminate on the basis of their religion? Because these children from Central America are overwhelmingly Catholic, right? So, are they ultimately going to place these children in with adoptive parents? What's going to happen? What's happening in the border is we don't know. What we do know is that faith-based organizations cannot provide foster care services when it is not a result of a true choice and when it's coerced. That violates the Establishment Clause, and it's clearly established.
So it's basically supposed to work that any couple that's meets the qualifications for adoption, whatever the economic, criminal background check, whatever the other qualifications, they all get put in a pool, and then the adoption agency chooses the best one for the particular child.
Well, it's a government function, right. All right, and people have varying degrees of trust for the government and what you think that government ought to be done and not be doing, but taking care of the children is the job of Child Protective Services, which is under the Health and Human Services, both at the state level and it's what they're supposed to do. So ideally, they take and they figure out, and in front of a judge, what is in the best interest of these kids. What I'm saying is, when these children when they outsource that essential government function and they allow private agencies to do it, fine. There is a manual that says this is the rules that you have to follow. You're going to be a contractor with the government, you have to do this. What these groups are doing are saying, we're going to follow our faith. You give us the kids, we're going to follow our faith. And we're only going to place children with people that sign aboard our statement of faith, and we're not going to place children with gay couples. We're not going to give them to family members that are medical marijuana patients, because why? Our preference is our network of good Christian families who are going to pay us $20,000 if we sever these parental ties and place them for adoption.
Call me a cynic, I could be completely wrong, but if these faith-based foster cares have contracts with the federal government, well, the federal government is largely bought off by Big Pharma. So they don't want...
Well, they're drugging them. I don't know if you've seen some of the headlines. They've been drugging them against their will. Because how else do you take a bunch of kids and put them in a cage and make them calm down?
Right. So obviously, if it's the government in control that is totally tied to Big Pharma, they don't want marijuana, medical or otherwise.
No, of course not. It's been a justification for too much. I mean, domestically, the drug, I'll quote you some history here. Nixon, as you know, forever ago, started the drug war. And one of his henchmen, literally one of his henchmen, did time, I believe, Ehrlichman, was interviewed late in life. and he was instrumental. He was Nixon's domestic advisor on drug war. And this reporter, formerly of Wall Street Journal, wrote in Atlantic, I believe, Baum, interviewed him and about the origins of the drug war. And he said, look, you have to remember, this was 1968, 70. The Nixon administration had two principal enemies, the progressive anti-war left and black people. And we couldn't make it a crime to be either young, long-haired, or black, but we could criminalize their common pleasure. And in doing so, we could disrupt their meetings, and we could infiltrate their networks, and we could march them in front of the cameras night after night. And if we could link the hippies with marijuana and the blacks with heroin and demonize them, he said, did we know we were lying about the danger of these drugs? Of course we did. Of course we did. And so you have a situation that's built on that. Now, by the time 2000, 2001 rolled around, some of the first statistics were coming out about the racial disparities in the enforcement of the drug wars. We found in Texas that blacks constituted 12% of the population, but half of the arrests and 75% of the years served in prison for drug offenses when drug use was constant across ethnic groups. And we began to be able to use some of these numbers. And in fact took down the Texas Regional Narcotics Task Force system because of massive racial profiling, a case called Tulia, Texas. And so you've got to understand the kind of, these economic forces, just like you say, follow the money. The DEA budget is billions and billions of dollars, much of it funded by civil asset forfeiture, taking people's things. But follow the money. These, this beast, this machine, this that has intervened in Mexico and created all these refugees is then at the other end waiting for them and is building huge detention centers, for-profit prisons, right? And detaining those people and taking their kids and putting them into the largest Christian adoption agency in the United States. Clearly coerced. There is no choice, zero, not even a little. No due process. Busting up these families and violating every single, due process right that exists to protect them. And many international treaties, it's horrific what's doing. And my question really is, they've placed 80, I believe, with Just Bethany Christian. And the question really is, how can you take these children, and they purport to be against it, how can you take these children without being complicit in what's been done here?
Right, because you see governors were taking back their National Guard in protest of what the Trump administration was doing. And there are other agencies that have rejected these kids because they don't agree with it.
Well, and now Trump signed something that really doesn't do anything other than theoretically stop it or make it harder. But it does nothing for these thousands of kids that are already here. There's 2,000 or 3,000 they can't even find.
And by the way, they don't even know for a lot of these who their parents are. It was total chaos when they took them away. So how are you going to get back? How are you going to get them back if they can't speak for themselves?
No. It's really genuinely horrific. And I understand churches and people, citizens, religious or otherwise, really wanting to wake up in the morning and go to work to help refugees. I'm not sitting here dissing on either the Protestant charities or the Catholic charities' convictions. I believe that they genuinely do want to save a soul, save a baby, The thing is, from the way that I've come upon this issue, is that it seems simply impossible to do without violating the Constitution. Right. In this, with regards to these coerced separations of children from their families. What would the discussion might be different if they were like taking all of these children from the border and then putting them with the Islamic Adoption Agency, and these kids were then being placed for adoption with the Islamic Adoption Agency that made money off of it.
Right. That's a great point. Yeah.
You know, I mean, really, we need to stop and think about, you know, it needs to be neutral in order to be constitutional. The religion clauses of the First Amendment are, you know, in order for it to be constitutional, it has to be neutral, right? And in order to be neutral, one of the things that has to happen, it has to be a product of true choice. And there's nothing, not with our clients domestically, nor with these refugees that are coming here, that amounts to anything close to any kind of a choice. The risk of indoctrination is certain. It's not high, it's certain, because there's no procedures in place to reunify these kids. Right. It's horrific what's going on domestically here. But to take and rip children away from their parents on the border, stick the parents in a cage, and place the children with the largest Christian adoption agency in the United States is simply unconstitutional.
And it's a racket. It definitely seems like these Christian private foundations are somehow benefiting the government too.
Well, you know, the government's not going to contract you to do something that's not in their interest. Like I say, this is a fundamentally governmental service. They are acting as if they were the state. They're what's called state actors. They're acting under the color of law. They are contracted with the government to provide the public with an essential government service, meaning they are bound by the Constitution of the United States, and they're bound by the state constitution as to the limits of what government can do. Well, one of the things that the governments cannot do is establish religion, which is why they went and sought from the state legislature to be exempt from the Constitution, so that they could place children with people that they thought would abide by their statement of faith. It's proselytization.
Unless you're Jeff Sessions, Ted Cruz, and the rest of the gang, who don't follow that.
Well, get me going.
I can. And apparently Trump, who has no religion other than himself. But
well, you know, I saw the Melania went down to the border today. I'm at a loss for words, really, because the scope of it is way beyond, you know, what we keep going back and forth on Facebook with, you know, well, they broke the law, and, well, they put their kids at risk, and, well, you know, this was a policy under Obama, and all this kind of stuff. Like I say, put this in context. We created these refugees. They're ours, you know. We don't have to go too far to find the Bible say and take care of, you know, women and children, widows and orphans, and refugees. And Jesus was a refugee, you know. He was even brown, you know. So it's not that. It's not that. It's the systematic machine that is created and self-funding between the drug war and the civil asset forfeiture and the for-profit prisons that have basically occupancy quotas that the state has to meet, otherwise they pay penalties under their contract. The state has to fill up those prison beds.
Well, I think, you know...
And now we got detention centers. They have to fill up these detention centers.
Yeah. I think, you know, to wrap it up, I also think it's a false prism, because who's really the most dangerous to the United States? MS-13 or white supremacists shooting up schools, malls? I mean, you want to look at actual danger, MS-13, no joke. Right. But that is a narrative by the right wing because of how they look.
Well, sure.
But the real threat, if you want to talk about people, you know, killing Americans, isn't that, is Americans killing Americans. Oh, yeah.